Fred Vasseur just confirmed on the record that Ferrari knows they have a deficit of performance in the straight line and have to work on it, but admitted it is like it is, validating paddock estimates that the SF-26 is down roughly 30 horsepower to Mercedes specifically. That admission hangs over Maranello right now because while the team principal has acknowledged the problem exists, nobody inside Ferrari has yet guaranteed that their radical two-phase engine recovery program will actually deliver the combined 30 horsepower gain they are targeting before the championship math becomes insurmountable. The tension here is not whether Ferrari understands the weakness, but whether their specific mechanical solution can arrive in time to matter. We know the deficit is real. Vasseur said so himself via Planet F1, but knowing and fixing are two different things entirely. So what happens if the fix fails? What happens if the new turbocharger blades cannot handle the combustion temperatures they were designed for? That question remains completely unanswered as we head toward Monza. Here is the hard number you need to anchor this entire story: 30 horsepower. That is the estimated gap between the SF-26 and the Mercedes power unit on the straights, according to Scuderia fans reporting. It is not an official Ferrari figure. It is not an FIA-published metric. It is a paddock estimate derived from telemetry analysis and sector times. But it is the number that defines Ferrari's 2026 season. Every qualifying session, every race strategy call, every overtaking attempt at Spa or Silverstone. That is the mountain they are trying to climb with a redesigned turbocharger that has not yet turned a competitive lap in anger. Can they really erase that gap with a single component swap, or is the deficit more structural than anyone wants to admit? Ferrari did not stumble into this problem by accident. They engineered it deliberately. Multiple outlets, including Motor Biscuit, have confirmed that the root technical cause traces back to a conscious design choice made during the 2026 power unit development phase. Ferrari originally selected a smaller turbocharger specifically to reduce throttle lag off the start line. Under the old standing start dynamics, that was a rational bet. Faster getaway, better launch control, track position gained in the first 3 seconds. Then the FIA introduced a new 5-second pre-start procedure that fundamentally changed how power units deploy energy before the lights go out. That regulatory shift eliminated the exact benefit Ferrari had designed the smaller turbo to provide. The advantage vanished overnight, but the straight-line performance cost remained bolted to the engine. No offsetting gain, just pure deficit. A strategic bet that backfired completely. That is the narrative Motor Biscuit has constructed through detailed technical analysis. But here is where uncertainty enters the frame as a genuine twist rather than a simple disclaimer. No Ferrari official has ever gone on record calling this decision a mistake or confirming that the small turbo choice backfired. That characterization comes entirely from external reporting and paddock interpretation, not from Maranello itself. Vasseur confirmed the deficit exists. He never confirmed why it exists. So we are left with a critical gap between what analysts believe happened and what Ferrari has actually admitted. Is the smaller turbo truly the sole culprit, or is there a deeper architectural issue that even ADUO cannot fully resolve? The team's silence on causation makes that question impossible to answer definitively right now. What we do know is that Ferrari has responded with a structured two-phase recovery program called ADUO. Phase 1, ADUO 1, deployed ahead of the Austrian Grand Prix. It combined software calibration changes with a newly developed shell fuel compound. The result was an estimated 7 to 8 horsepower gain according to Motor Biscuit. Real progress, measurable improvement, but nowhere near enough. Phase 2, ADUO 2, is the main event. A completely redesigned turbocharger featuring new blade angles, revised blade count, and materials specifically built to handle higher combustion temperatures. This is not a tweak. It is a ground-up component replacement targeting a combined 30 horsepower recovery when stacked with ADUO 1 gains. The expected debut venue is Monza, the Temple of Speed, the most power-sensitive circuit on the entire 2026 calendar. The timing is not accidental. It is existential. Lewis Hamilton articulated exactly what that 30 horsepower gap looks like from inside the cockpit when he stated via Planet F1 that Mercedes takes a huge step on the straights because rivals have a little bit more deployment and less derating at the end of the straights. That specific phrasing matters enormously because it shifts the conversation away from peak dyno numbers toward energy management strategy under the 2026 regulations, where power unit output is roughly an even split between combustion and electric delivery. Raw horsepower tells only half the story. Deployment efficiency tells the other half. And right now, Ferrari is losing both battles simultaneously against a Mercedes package that manages its electrical harvest more effectively through the speed trap. So where does that leave us with the deficit question? We have Vasseur's confirmation, we have Hamilton's driver feedback, we have paddock estimates. But we still lack a single unified official number from Maranello itself, which means every discussion about closing that gap carries an inherent margin of error that no amount of wind tunnel testing can fully eliminate until ADUO2 actually runs in competition. This brings us to a critical distinction that often gets lost in headline summaries. The 30 horsepower figure circulating through the paddock represents the combined target of both ADUO phases working together, not the standalone output of the new turbocharger alone. ADUO1 delivered 7 to 8 horsepower through fuel and calibration work ahead of Austria. ADUO2 must therefore contribute roughly 22 to 23 additional horsepower to reach the combined 30 horsepower recovery threshold that Ferrari has internally targeted according to MotorBiscuit's reporting. Conflating these two separate upgrade steps into a single magic bullet creates false expectations about what Monza will actually reveal. If ADUO2 delivers only 15 horsepower instead of 23, the combined total falls short of the 30 horsepower benchmark, even though measurable progress has occurred. Nuance matters here. Precision matters more. Ferrari's straight-line struggles exist alongside genuine chassis strength that multiple outlets, including Scuderia fans, have described as one of the strongest packages on the 2026 grid. This is not a car that fails everywhere. It is a car that excels in corners while bleeding time on straights, creating a performance profile that makes qualifying particularly agonizing because Sector 2 gains get erased in Sectors 1 and 3. The power deficit was accepted as a deliberate trade-off during the design phase rather than emerging as an unexpected failure, which means the engineering team understood the risk they were taking when they committed to the smaller turbo architecture. They believed the start line advantage would compensate for top speed vulnerability. The FIA's 5-second pre-start procedure removed that compensation mechanism without removing the underlying hardware constraint. Blade angles changed, materials upgraded, count revised. These are the specific mechanical interventions that ADUO2 brings to the table, each one targeting a different aspect of turbocharger efficiency under sustained high-load conditions typical of Monza's full-throttle sections. New blade angles optimize airflow dynamics at higher rotational speeds. Revised blade count balances spool-up responsiveness against peak flow capacity. Advanced materials withstand combustion temperatures that would degrade earlier spec components over race distance. None of these changes address the fundamental sizing decision that created the deficit in the first place. They work around it, they compensate for it, but they do not undo the original architectural bet that backfired when regulations shifted beneath Ferrari's feet. Hamilton's observation about derating patterns reveals something deeper than simple power deficiency. It exposes a systemic energy management disadvantage that compounds lap after lap because the SF-26 must conserve electrical deployment earlier in the straight to avoid complete battery depletion before the braking zone arrives. Mercedes can deploy longer and harder because their energy harvest cycle operates more efficiently under the 2026 power unit balance. Closing that gap requires not just more peak power, but better energy throughput across the entire lap, which is why Shell's fuel compound work in ADUO1 addressed combustion efficiency alongside raw output. Fuel chemistry affects thermal management. Thermal management affects electrical harvesting. Electrical harvesting affects deployment duration. Everything connects. Lewis Hamilton stated via the race that the Ferrari simulator really sends him the wrong direction, so he thinks he might cut that out for now, a decision that directly impacts how the team gathers setup data while trying to fix the power unit deficit. This is not a minor preference issue, it is a fundamental breakdown in the virtual-to-real correlation loop that modern F1 teams depend on for development feedback. When Hamilton described his Miami Grand Prix setup as having poor corner entry responsiveness and massive mid-corner understeer after following simulator guidance, he was identifying a tool that actively misled engineering decisions rather than supporting them. The car didn't feel snappy on entry. The data said it should. Reality disagreed completely. Trust fractured. Simulator abandoned. Feedback lost. That three-word sequence captures the operational cost of Hamilton's decision to stop using the driver in-loop simulator between races while still attending factory meetings. He skipped simulator preparation entirely before the Canadian Grand Prix. He described Shanghai, where he also had limited or no simulator work, as ultra encouraging. Suzuka left him on the back foot. Ahead of Monaco, he told Planet F1 he was unlikely to return to using the simulator because there were too many risks. Each track produced different results without simulator input, which suggests the correlation problem is not consistent enough to calibrate around. Sometimes skipping the simulator helps. Sometimes it hurts. There is no reliable pattern yet. This simulator crisis intersects directly with the SF-26's straight-line weakness because setup optimization for power-sensitive circuits requires accurate modeling of drag to downforce trade-offs that only a correlated simulator can provide efficiently. Without trustworthy virtual testing, Ferrari must rely more heavily on Friday practice sessions at tracks like Monza and Spa to validate aerodynamic configurations, compressing development windows into hours instead of weeks. Hamilton's maiden Ferrari victory at the Spanish Grand Prix came after he publicly credited a rebuilt trust relationship with the team, including engineering changes to his personal support group and better alignment with senior figures, according to Motorsport Week and GP blog coverage. That emotional milestone in Barcelona demonstrated what becomes possible when driver feedback loops function correctly, making the simulator breakdown elsewhere on the calendar even more conspicuous by contrast. Hamilton has described his relationship with Charles Leclerc as allies rather than foes via F1i, framing their dynamic as collaborative rather than adversarial during a season where both drivers face identical hardware limitations. Ferrari opted for continuity of race engineers for both drivers into 2026, a deliberate choice prioritizing relationship stability during a regulation change year, according to Scuderia fans. That institutional commitment to personnel consistency stands in sharp tension against the technical instability revealed by Hamilton's simulator rejection. You cannot build stable driver-engineer relationships if the tools those engineers depend on produce unreliable outputs. The human infrastructure is solid. The digital infrastructure is compromised. Both must function together for championship contention. The 2025 season context makes this turnaround narratively significant. Hamilton was consistently outperformed by Leclerc during his first Ferrari campaign. Chairman John Elkann publicly told both drivers to talk less and focus on driving, a comment widely reported as damaging to Hamilton's confidence and trust in the organization. His 2026 form improvement, culminating in that Barcelona victory, represents a marked shift from being a clear second driver to becoming central to Ferrari's championship competitiveness this season. But centrality requires reliable tools. If the simulator remains untrustworthy through the remainder of 2026, Hamilton's ability to contribute setup feedback diminishes precisely when Ferrari needs maximum driver input to optimize ADUO2 integration at power-sensitive venues. The turbo upgrade addresses hardware. The simulator problem addresses process. Both demand resolution simultaneously.